I've always felt in tune with the slower pace of country living. The turning of the seasons, the scent of newly turned earth, and the steady buzz of our tractor were my everyday soundtrack. Yet, as I grew older, my curiosity about the world outside our farm kept growing. Tales of far-off cities and foreign places stirred a longing in me to see more than what our small town provided. Our way of living was straightforward, anchored in daily chores and resilience. Although we managed okay, the idea of luxury was completely alien. My parents seemed satisfied with their lives, but I yearned to travel and see the world. I realized I'd have to make a bold move if I wanted to break free from the farm. Being raised on a farm taught me that if I wanted something bigger than short drives to the local store, I needed to do something drastic. We weren't poverty-stricken, but we were definitely not well off. By the time I was 7, I was already lugging and stacking hay bales. Right after high school, going against my parents' wishes, my closest friend Troy and I signed up for the Marines. We ended up spending 4 years stationed in South Korea and Japan. Even though we were told to stick to spots frequented by Americans, Troy and I made it our mission to see as much as we could, convinced it might be our only shot at world travel. I split my income, half went toward having fun, while the other half I sent back home. Those 4 years were mostly uneventful, filled with guard duty and a few minor escapades. By the time we were officially done, people had stopped calling me Darren Shore and started calling me Scout. That nickname followed me home, and in Ford, there weren't many job options aside from farming or construction. I went for construction so I could grind hard by day and still have enough energy to hang out with friends at night. I first laid eyes on Nina in Higgins' restaurant, and it felt like instant chemistry. It took me quite a few tries to get her to say yes to a date, but when she finally did, things moved fast. We tied the knot 9 months later at age 24. We were happy, but we knew we needed to build our savings before having kids. My dad suggested I look for better-paying work, and he wasn't wrong. We barely scraped by each month. 2 years into our marriage, our finances were tight, and we lived from one paycheck to the next. Somerville and Kensington, larger towns nearby, had more job openings, and we dreamed of one day getting a foothold there. One afternoon, Nina was thrilled to tell me about a brand new gym in Kensington that offered a higher wage. She couldn't wait to apply, believing it might help us finally save enough to start a family. She landed the job at Stokes Fitness Palace after a promising interview. Initially, she dressed in pretty modest workout gear, but over time, her outfits became more revealing, which made me uneasy. When I dropped by the gym, though, I noticed everyone dressed that way, so I felt somewhat reassured. Her confidence soared thanks to the job, and her newfound energy spilled over into our sex life. She attributed this spark to regular workouts and a healthier routine, and I was glad to see such positive changes between us. Then one Friday, Nina mentioned she was up for a promotion and asked if I'd join her for a special spouses event at the gym. Although I had my doubts, I agreed to tag along. On the night of the event, something felt off, so I brought Troy with me for backup. He handed me a spy pen that could record audio, just in case things went south. When we showed up at the gym, the bouncers almost turned Troy away, but I insisted he come in, and we were both allowed inside after handing over our phones. Once we got in, I noticed Nina standing beside her boss, Leonard Titan Drake, looking visibly anxious. She was wearing a skimpy bikini that totally threw me off. When I pressed for an explanation, Titan smugly revealed he'd organized an arm wrestling tournament, with the victor claiming a cash prize as well as a night with Nina. She seemed reluctant at first, but the promise of money drew her in until she finally said yes. Titan then mentioned he planned to drug me with ketamine if I lost, ensuring I wouldn't remember any of it, so Nina could pocket the money and carry on as if nothing had happened. In that moment, I saw how Titan's scheme was full of holes. He hadn't counted on how loyal his henchmen were or the fact that I'd catch on to his plan. I knew I needed to keep calm and figure out my next step. One of his sidekicks bragged about knowing the perfect dose to knock me out, but I was finished playing along. Forget it. I'm done. If Nina's even considering this, she's all yours. Do whatever you want. I'm leaving, I said in a flat voice. Titan barked back. You can't leave, Scout. A deal's a deal. I promised Nina you'd compete and forget the whole thing. I told him I didn't care anymore and mentioned I wanted a divorce. Nina burst into tears. I ignored her and said, "If you insist I compete, then you'll have to put me down for good afterward." Titan waved off my threat. "Let's get to it," he commanded. And they shoved me into the gym, where a group of men whistled and hollered at my wife, who was barely covered. I glanced around for Troy, but he was gone. "Where'd Troy go?" I asked. One of the guys smirked and lied. "He left on his own." But I knew my buddy wouldn't take off that easily, so I suspected he was lurking somewhere close. My gut told me I needed help right then and there. Meanwhile, Titan, wearing a lightweight jacket to conceal his muscular arms, hyped up the crowd. "All right, folks, this is it. The moment we've been waiting for," he boomed. About 40 of us paid to participate and signed the standard liability forms, meaning Stokes Fitness Palace wasn't responsible for injuries. "This is double elimination," he went on. "So if you lose twice, you're done. Nina's husband, Scout, will be jumping in. He's gonna take on our top contender. If he loses, the champ wins it all." The men all nodded in agreement. Titan grinned. "Perfect. The victor walks away with $20,000, a trophy, and a night with Nina. You've all seen her clips, so whoever wins is in for a real treat." The crowd cheered while Nina giggled and teased them. Titan said, "We've got official refs from the World Arm Wrestling Federation, and whatever they say goes." 2 matches started at once, and the gym filled with cheers and moans as competitors duked it out. I sat in the middle, feeling sick as I watched my wife let other men touch her. Anger flared in my chest. After about 90 minutes, only 10 guys were left in the tournament. One of the thugs sneered in my ear, "Nice job running your mouth. When this is over, I'll beat you so bad and tell everyone you tripped down the stairs." In the semifinals, Titan sailed to victory, setting up the final showdown between me and him. He refused to back down, certain I was no match for him. I peeled off my windbreaker, wrapped it around my waist, and stepped forward to the table. The crowd went silent. Everyone assumed Titan would walk away with Nina. "Where's the $40,000 prize money?" I asked, wanting proof. With a mocking smile, Titan replied, "Why bother asking? We all know you're not going to win." I locked eyes with Titan and said, "I still want to see the money." With a nod, 2 of his henchmen brought over a sealed box, and the referees verified that it indeed contained the cash. I then asked referee Micah Holloway to safeguard it and ensure I could walk away in one piece afterward. Titan gave a smirk. "You're not going anywhere," he said, but the look in his eyes suggested he was lying. I guessed his crew was waiting outside, ready to intercept me. Still, I pressed on. "I'm here only for the money." I couldn't care less about her now. Win or lose, I'm tempted to leave her behind. Nina threw me a furious glare. "Enough chatter," Titan growled. "Let's settle this." In a sudden burst of provocation, Nina kissed him hard, and my blood boiled. When she tried to do the same to me, I rejected her. "Don't even think about touching me, Nina. You're nothing but a cheating witch. If I had the chance, I'd divorce you right here and now. Get out of my sight." She started crying, and the crowd murmured in shock. The referees looked uneasy, and I hoped they saw that I was clearly being coerced. Titan slammed his hand on the table and taunted me. "Put your arm up, so we can see who's the real man." The crowd roared in his favor. Reluctantly, I placed my elbow on the table, locking hands with Titan. Referee Bryce Hamilton ran through the rules, and the first round began. I drove forward with all my power, but our hands barely moved. Titan grinned and methodically pressed my hand to the table, taking the first victory as the onlookers erupted with cheers. I took a moment to catch my breath, then reminded everyone, "It's best 2 out of 3, and braced myself for the second round. Titan gave a smug laugh, certain he had me beat. "You've got no chance," he jeered. The crowd egged him on, stoking my anger. Bryce restarted the match, and Titan's confident smirk returned. I threw every ounce of strength into our lock, and after about 10 seconds he began to falter. My arm stabilized, and I drove back with everything I had. The spectators fell silent as I gradually pinned his hand. The referee's call of my victory caught the entire room off guard. Titan leaped away from the table, stunned. "That was a fluke," he hollered, ripping off his jacket and then shredding his shirt to show off his physique. Slamming his elbow on the table once more, he was ready for the decisive round. I ignored his showboating, staying focused on my breathing. Bryce gave the signal, and Titan unleashed his strength right from the start, nearly forcing my hand to the pad. My arm shook, but I waited until he began to tire. Suddenly, Nina's voice broke through the commotion. "Finish him, Titan. I want you." Her words enraged me and fueled a fresh burst of energy. I turned the tables, slowly driving Titan's hand back until I finally slammed it down. The referee declared me the winner, 2-1. A hush fell over the crowd. In utter disbelief, Titan barked, "How on earth did you do that?" "I'll tell you," I replied calmly. "If you agree to 2 conditions, hand over the 40 grand and let me leave here unscathed." Titan reluctantly consented, and Micah passed me the cash, which I slid into my windbreaker. Addressing the crowd, I said, "I won fair and square, and none of you are going to lay a finger on me." Titan backed me up, though I suspected his men were out there waiting. "I've spent my life farming and doing construction," I explained, "building stamina and strength. In the Marines, I arm wrestled all the time and never lost. Unlike Titan, my muscles aren't just for show. They're built to endure. That's how I beat him. Now I'm heading out." I grabbed my phone and started toward the exit. People simply stared, still stunned, as Nina called after me, offering me a ride and a chance to talk. "I'll be waiting outside," I replied. "Go put some clothes on." She interpreted that as my willingness to discuss things, but in reality, I was just buying time to slip away. As I neared the door, I spotted Troy's car. He flashed his headlights as a signal he was ready. At that moment, 3 of Titan's goons came charging out from behind an SUV, heading straight for me. Fortunately, Marine training kicked in, and I sprinted faster than they could manage, diving headfirst into Troy's passenger seat. He hit the gas without hesitation, tires screeching as we sped away. I made it out with my memory completely intact, I told him, panting. Troy immediately cleared up any confusion. "I didn't leave you in there on purpose," he said. "A bunch of tough guys forced me out, chucked my phone, and told me it was a private event. I was close to calling the cops," he continued. "But nobody else showed up, so I figured you were handling it somehow. When I saw those thugs chasing you, I knew it wasn't friendly." "What exactly happened in there, and where do we go now?" I took a breath. "Let's head back to my place," I told him. On the drive, I filled him in on everything. Troy was floored by Nina's betrayal, especially the part about drugging me. "So what's the plan?" he asked, genuinely concerned. As we rolled up behind my apartment building, I told him, "Park out of sight. Nina will probably arrive soon, and if she's alone, I'll talk to her while I pack my things. Mind if I crash at your place for a few days?" "Absolutely," he said. "I only have a couch, but it's all yours." "That'll work fine. If she shows up with any muscle, I'll slip out the back and head straight to your place." Right then, a thought came to me. I took the money and hid it inside an empty fast food bag, stashing it under Troy's spare tire. "I might need backup," I warned him. "I've got you," Troy replied, revealing his handgun. He tucked it into his waistband and followed me inside. I was nearly done packing when I heard the front door unlock. Troy quietly slipped into the closet as Nina raced in, looking shaken. "Thank God you're here," she gasped. "I was terrified you'd be gone. We have to talk." Her voice quivered with regret. "Ich lernte hier." "You come alone? Or are those creeps from earlier hanging around?" She raised her hands. "I came by myself. I'm sorry about tonight. I got carried away. My job was to hype them up, and it escalated too far." I gave a hollow laugh. "Why bother? They'd already paid. It's not like you'd get a bigger cut by kissing them." Nina claimed she was trying to look out for both of us, ensuring we'd get the money no matter what. She said she admired my victory, insisting she was glad to be leaving with me, not someone else. "That's interesting," I countered. Because I distinctly recall you yelling for Titan to finish me off so you could have him. Her eyes dropped to the floor as she mumbled that her real goal was to build a family with me. This was just about the cash, she insisted, adding that Titan was confident I'd lose and wouldn't remember a thing. I cut her off. Even if I forgot, you'd still be a cheater. Nina, you were perfectly okay with me getting drugged and restrained against my will. You sold me out. That's something I can't forgive. We're done. Tears began streaming down her face. She shook her head. No, you don't mean that. We belong together, she pleaded. A sudden knock on the door broke the tension. Nina gave a sweet little smile. Why don't you see who it is? I don't care who it is, I muttered, already guessing her thugs had arrived. Nina snatched my phone and walked out. The next thing I knew, she had let Titan and his 5 cronies into my apartment. I've got his phone, she announced. He's not recording a thing. She had no idea that I'd already switched on a recording device. All right, she continued. Just hold him down, drug him, and make it look like a random mugging. Enraged, I shouted, what are you doing in my house? Get out. Nina put on her best apologetic tone. I'm sorry, honey, but you can't remember any of this. It'll be easier if you just drink the stuff and pass out. Otherwise, they'll pin you down, shove it down your throat, and rough you up a bit. You never planned for this to happen, did you? She added, almost guiltily. Without hesitation, I pulled out my Glock 17. Sit down, I commanded. I don't want anyone to get shot, but if it comes to that, 3 of you will be on the floor before the others even blink. They froze, definitely not expecting me to be armed. Titan sneered. You wouldn't dare shoot. We'll still take you out. You willing to bet? I'm a Marine, I answered calmly. And that means I'm trained to pull the trigger when I have to. So unless you want a bullet in 3 of you, sit your butts down. One of the men paused, then finally spoke up. Why should we? We still have a shot. You have no shot, I replied. If you want to talk, sit. Otherwise, I'll be on the phone with the cops in 2 seconds. Your call. They did as I said, settling back on the couch and a few chairs, making it harder for them to lunge at me. I stood against the opposite wall, sitting on a kitchen chair with the pistol on my thigh. My index finger stayed just off the trigger, poised to act. Nina tried a new angle. Look, sweetheart. All you need to do is hand over the 20 grand and take the ketamine. Tomorrow morning, it'll be like none of this ever happened, and we'll be $20,000 richer. I glared at her. How exactly would you explain this cash to me? It's simple, she said confidently. You won $40,000, gave me half to hang on to, and then got mugged on your way home. They'll rough you up a bit to make it believable, but you'll wake up as my devoted husband, and we'll have a bright future. I started laughing, a reaction that seemed to rattle the group. Nina looked at me like I'd lost my mind and started to get up, probably aiming for my weapon. Titan coaxed her. He won't hurt you. The man loves you. He's half right, I said quietly. I used to love you, but if you stand up, I'll put 3 of these guys on the floor. She sank back down, eyes wide. Nina, you're such a fool. You actually believed Titan's nonsense about wiping my memory so you could tell me any story you liked, but you were never going to see a dime of that cash. Their plan was to dose me, have their fun with you, film it all, and use it for blackmail. This was never a one-and-done deal. Nina tried to deny it, claiming these men were already satisfied with what they got. I pointed out the video she'd filmed, enough to destroy her reputation if it hit the internet. Whose idea was it to drag me into this mess tonight? I demanded. She confessed it was Titan's plan. He wanted to humiliate me, not just by having sex with her but also by making me watch. He craved total control, ensuring I wouldn't interfere or call the police. After capturing the blackmail material, he'd practically own her. You were never getting that money, Nina, I went on. They'd use you whenever they pleased, and you'd have nowhere else to go. Finally, she looked like she understood. She admitted she had only planned to sleep with Titan, not the others. I laughed at her naivete. So you think they'd go to all this trouble and not share you around? That's ridiculous. They'd each get what they wanted, and your reward would be a lifetime of blackmail. Even if you got the cash, they'd force you to pay in other ways. Maybe they'd stage some accident at the gym or make it look like you were mugged here at home. They'd break bones if they felt like it, and you'd never see a cent. And don't kid yourself. You'd stay on birth control out of fear you'd wind up pregnant by one of these creeps. Not me. She looked completely stunned as the truth sank in. I'd figured out every angle, and she realized I was done with her and her treachery. Nina stared at me, panic all over her face. "Let me highlight another gaping hole in your cover story," I said. "You claim I gave you $20,000 before someone mugged me, but there were 42 witnesses, including referees, who saw me leave with all the cash. A real mugger wouldn't leave a cent behind, so that lie wouldn't hold any water. How can some dumb jarhead outthink us?" Titan grumbled. Nina looked mortified, realizing just how thoroughly she'd been duped. "You think I'm stupid because I don't have a fancy degree?" I retorted. "We Marines get trained to think under pressure. I knew those 5 guys were a real threat from the start. You saying you could control them was laughable. No one can control them except themselves. Yeah, you're all buddies, but it's not just about the money. There's not enough cash in play to risk everything. The real reward here was Nina. I'll bet you pitched this plan to your buddies, and they were all too eager to help." Suddenly, Titan lunged, snatching Nina and using her as a shield. "Drop the gun, or I'll snap her neck," he snarled. "I'm not going to shoot you, Titan, but harm her, and I'll put down 3 of your men," I warned, raising my Glock. "Now let her go." One of the other men, more level-headed, broke in. "Lenny, don't do it. He's not bluffing. He'll shoot us." Titan hesitated, then released Nina. The same guy kept talking. "You're not pulling the trigger on anyone. You don't want a prison sentence. And you're not calling the cops either." "Why wouldn't I?" I countered. He explained. "We have 42 witnesses who saw your wife acting like a total train wreck. People will think you were in on it, pimping her out. You can deny it, but it'll look like you just got jealous in the end. Sure, we might have threatened you, but actual liquidation? Give me a break. You can't prove any different." Titan let Nina go, and she glared at him with a mix of fear and fury. The goon continued. "They'll catch us with ketamine and a video camera. But we're vets. We have an explanation for everything. Nina won't risk reporting us. She's got 0 evidence. Everyone saw her performance tonight. She shot that video, and we both know she won't want that going viral in a small town." Titan growled. "I need that money. I just bought a new truck." A sharper guy in the group chimed in. "Forget it, man. You lost. Splitting what's left 5 ways isn't worth it. Nina was the real draw, and we were planning to keep her as our prize. We wouldn't just turn her into some open commodity right away. The plan was to keep using her in more events and eventually maybe let her have a kid if we decided. We'd toss her a little cash to keep her from complaining. But now it's done. We're out of here." The guy standing beside the leader chimed in. "We'll head out and let you 2 sort this out. But if I'm being honest, no amount of counseling is likely to fix what just happened. Forgiveness won't come easily, if at all." I raised an eyebrow. "I've actually got a suggestion," I said half sarcastically. "There's still some ketamine left. Mix it with a bit of alcohol, about 6 shots, and it should wipe out any memory of tonight. If you really care about Nina, you could do it once we're gone. She's not going to work at that gym anymore, so she'd be safe from us. Maybe she's learned the lesson about being gullible and cheating." I couldn't help but notice how keen they were to keep their plan alive. "You honestly think I'd go for that?" I asked, letting a hint of disbelief seep into my voice. The same man shrugged. "It'd be like a do-over for your marriage. You could tell the honest version of how you got the money, that you won it in an arm wrestling tournament. Most of the other contestants live out of town, so you probably won't bump into them again. And if you did, maybe they'd make a quick remark about your hot wife, but they'd probably skip the part about how she was acting." Pretending to consider, I then pressed, "So, how would Nina explain me losing my memory?" He sighed. "That's the tricky part. She'd have to say you hit your head after having too much to drink. Maybe you'd go to the hospital, so you'd need a decent story. But deep down, you'd still be married. Love can make you trust her side of things. They all chuckled, probably hoping I'd find their argument convincing. I was sure they were just waiting for a chance to come back for the cash. He went on. But you'd have to take the ketamine tonight for it to erase enough of your memory. You might recall being at the gym, but not what really happened there. That'd give Nina room to shape the story. I pointed out the main problem. And what about Nina? I could just ditch her for good and move on with my life. Honestly, that's probably the smartest option. Nina started pleading, swearing she'd never do anything like this again. I shook my head. But you still cheated, I told her. And if I wait until after you guys leave to take the drug, there's nothing stopping you from blackmailing Nina for the money later. You'd sow doubt and drag us down all over again. They all shook their heads in unison, and even Nina joined in. I demanded they each promise not to harass us anymore. They mumbled their assurances. But there's another hole in your plan, I continued. Nina would have to rough me up enough to justify my memory loss. She'd need to make it look like a legit accident. Could you do that, Nina? She practically jumped at the chance. Oh, absolutely. I'd make it convincing, she said, sounding weirdly enthusiastic. I'd throw in a few kicks to your head and ribs, maybe even fake a mugging scenario. We could say we went out to celebrate and you got ambushed. I could pretend I ran for help, and by the time I got back, they were gone. Then I'd drag you home and kick you here to leave enough bruises. Maybe a couple shots to the groin, just enough to hurt without causing permanent damage. I stared at her, astonished by how fast she jumped on board with hurting me. The 6 men looked just as surprised. And tomorrow, she added, I'd be all caring, bringing you ice packs for your head and other parts. We'd keep our marriage together, have the money for a baby, and I promise I wouldn't cheat again. I wouldn't even let anyone touch or kiss me. I noticed she only said that because I'd labeled it cheating. She still didn't fully grasp what she'd done. I locked eyes with her. You really wanted to sleep with Titan, didn't you? You'd be thinking about that while you were kicking me. She gave a shrug. Okay, I won't lie. Yeah, I was excited at the idea of sleeping with him. The way he looked at me turned me on. Would have been wild, but now I'm mad at both of you. You for ruining it and him for setting it up. I'd like to punt both of you in the crotch. Maybe that could be the price for letting you both walk. I get to do a couple of free kicks on Titan too, she added with a twisted smirk. Titan snarled. No way. Look, I'm just laying out the facts. You won't remember this anyway, and neither will he. Judging by Nina's flushed cheeks, she'd remember every bit of it, and she'd enjoy the thought of hurting me, just like she was fine breaking my heart earlier, as long as I remained clueless later. Since everyone's suddenly being honest, I've got some questions before I decide whether I'll actually let you go, I said. Or before I consider Nina's little plan to wipe my memory. They both nodded like eager students. You claimed you never actually slept together, I continued. And you got cocky because you thought I'd forget everything if you drugged me. Nina also mentioned she'd insisted I get a chance to win the so-called prize, though she assumed I'd lose. But be straight with me. Did you plan on making me watch first, then dose me up? Because you keep hinting that was the idea. They shot each other a look, then admitted, yeah, we thought it would be exciting to have you watch before we knocked you out. Titan added. Nina really liked the idea of that power dynamic. I couldn't help but notice the word power, especially since Nina seemed pretty thrilled about the possibility of kicking me while I was half out of it. Maybe just to hear me yell. Wasn't only my idea, Nina protested, still oblivious to what she was confessing. Titan smirked. We thought it'd be hot if you cried while watching him. We wanted you to man up. I pressed further. Okay, so who suggested it first? Titan didn't hesitate. I did, he said. I looked at Nina. But you contributed plenty of suggestions to spice it up, right? Then I recalled something else. You said she treated you guys earlier today to prove she was serious. Are you talking about? One of the men confirmed. Yep. She agreed to a little something for each of us to show she was on board, especially since we couldn't all enter the contest for her. I kept my emotions in check, just wanting the truth. All 5 men said she'd done it, each offering a detail or two. Nina tried to wrap it up. Just let them leave and deal with your memory. We can fix our relationship, and I swear I won't get tempted again. I had to stifle a bitter laugh. Right? After you get your jollies kicking me where it counts, I said sarcastically. Oh no, I wouldn't enjoy it, she protested. I'd only do enough damage to make the story credible. I looked at the group. You all planning on sneaking back here for the money, and Nina once I'm too drugged to fight back? They shook their heads in unison, insisting they had no such plan. I drew a second phone, leveling my Glock as a reminder not to test me. You're not fooling me, I said. You'd give us just enough time for me to down the ketamine, then swing right back for the cash and for Nina. Nina's eyes widened. You'd be out cold. So what's to stop them from finishing the job? I added. They'd make it look like a robbery. And trust me, they've likely been recording everything this whole time for more leverage. I mused out loud. I could pretend to take the ketamine, wait for you to come back, then catch you, but that's a dangerous gamble. Titan cursed me for being a dumb Marine who'd managed to foil them. I demanded to know where their camera was, and one of the guys admitted it was in a case by the door. Nina picked it up and tossed me the SD card, but I just shook my head. That's pointless if the footage is also saved on the camera's internal drive, I noted. I glanced at the group. I'm not interested in the video. Let Nina deal with that however she wants. If you decide to let them blackmail you, that's your business. I had more important concerns, specifically, the recording I'd been running from the start. Suddenly, I heard a voice on the line. 911. What's your emergency? Without missing a beat, I gave the dispatcher my name and address. I have 6 men here. My wife invited them over to attack and rob me. I'm holding them under duress. I need officers sent over immediately to lock them up. We don't need an ambulance yet, but if they try anything, we might. All 6 men looked at me with utter disbelief. What the hell? We were about to walk out peacefully. One snapped. We even talked about how you could patch things up with your wife. We gave you the camera so you could erase everything. We'd have nothing to blackmail you with. The veterinarian in the group protested. Nina, meanwhile, looked stunned. Well, my marriage is pretty much destroyed because of what you all pulled, I answered. So I'm returning the favor. Good luck explaining this to your wives, and let's see if they believe you. I doubt they're as gullible as mine, I added. 3 of the men started shifting like they might try something. I adjusted my grip on the Glock, making sure they saw my finger resting on the trigger. I wouldn't, I warned. This trigger's sensitive. Less than 2 pounds of pressure is all it takes. And Nina, I told you I'll never trust you again. You were way too eager to fake a mugging by stomping on me. I called out for Troy, who stepped in from around the corner. I've been using his phone to keep the 911 call open, I said, holding it up. Everything's been recorded, and the PIN recorder is backing it up, too. One of the men yelled, "That's in here." I shrugged. It's part of my official statement now. Whether it's admissible in court is one thing, but your wives might not appreciate hearing what's on it. I kept sweeping the gun across them, aware they were close to making a move. Troy, go outside and let the police know we're in here. I'll put down the gun once they walk in. They'll take us all down to the station except you because you weren't involved. Gather any evidence. Okay? I handed him the SD card from the camera. You got it, Troy said. I'll meet you at the station. Once he stepped out, we heard sirens drawing closer. The dispatcher came back on the line. Officers have arrived at your location. I yelled. The door's open, and I'm in the living room, holding the weapon by the barrel. The first officer through the door was Lieutenant Wade, Troy's older brother. What's going on here, Scout? Set the gun down and step back, he ordered. I complied, noticing his body camera was rolling. Long story short, I explained. My wife cheated on me and gave these guys some favors earlier, and she was planning to sleep with that one, I said, pointing at Titan. They tried to spike me with ketamine and alcohol. When that failed, they came here for round 2. My wife let them in and handed over my phone so I couldn't record. It's right there, in Titan's shirt pocket. I said, nodding. That phone should have proof of what they were up to. Titan immediately tried to spin it. He's nuts, Lieutenant. We drove Nina home after her husband abandoned her in Kensington. She invited us over to celebrate. He kept going. He's the one who said he feared for his life at the contest. I cut in. Take us all to the station. Let's get official statements on record. Wade gave me a nod, then did exactly what was needed. Everyone but Troy was soon in cuffs, loaded into police cruisers. Troy told Wade he'd secure the house and meet us later, I said, certain he'd upload the recordings as we planned. Once we were at the station, I went through everything that happened, outlining their plan. I suggested Wade check the case they left at my place for ketamine, as well as the camera with footage of Nina. Wade gave me a cup of coffee, then started taking everyone else's statements. He came back a while later looking serious. Scout, they're all telling the same story, that you're unhinged. They're saying you won that arm wrestling contest and flipped out afterward. One of them is a lawyer trying to represent the group, but since he's also a suspect, he can't do that. They're each handing over identical statements. Do you have any hard evidence? He continued, I couldn't open the files on that camera without a warrant, but I've taken it into evidence. I told him, look, I made an audio recording of their confessions, and I've already started making backup copies. That changes the whole situation. The moment Nina heard about the recording, she cracked, altering her story to claim she'd been seduced and blackmailed into cheating. Then an officer accompanied Troy and me back to my place, on my invitation, so no warrant was required, and they secured a small case one of the men left by the door. Inside, we found the camera Nina had pulled out earlier, 2 bottles of liquor, ketamine, large tubes of lubricant, and a couple of flexible hoses. When they downloaded the video from the camera, it clearly showed my future ex-wife eagerly hooking up with Titan and the other 5 men, going on about how much she got off on the thrill and how she couldn't wait for Titan to win so she could be with him. Even though it was pushing legal boundaries, Wade allowed me to see the footage at the station. By then, I had my own copy anyway, so I had plenty of evidence. Nina, Titan, and the other 5 guys ended up locked up until their arraignment on Monday. I stashed the SD card somewhere safe, but Wade advised Troy and me not to wander too far. Despite his warning, I decided to skip town early Sunday morning. Troy and I bought 2 cheap round-trip tickets to Vegas, where we spent the day gathering discarded sports betting slips, enough to cover nearly $40,000, in case I needed to claim I'd lost most of my prize money. We had ourselves a wild Vegas adventure, snapping photos at strip clubs, posing with liquor bottles, building a story that we'd blown our winnings on a spree. We also donated to a children's cancer hospital, got sweatshirts for our contribution, and planned to wear them on Monday. I ignored countless phone calls, guessing some of them were from Nina's parents. Finally, Wade texted me, demanding I call him. When I did, he was none too happy but told us to get back. Once we returned, Wade gave us an official warning. As he led us to the district attorney's office, we insisted we didn't realize we were supposed to remain in town. We figured nearby meant anywhere in the lower 48. Wade and the DA were not amused by our excuse. In front of the DA, I repeated every detail, consistent with the audio I'd recorded, and made it clear I was fully committed to divorcing Nina for good. I went to see a lawyer named Mr. Beaumont, who told me the divorce itself would cost around $2,000. However, he emphasized that my bigger concerns were the criminal charges pending against Nina and the other men. He assured me not to worry about hiding my funds, since I didn't have much left anyway, and advised me to focus on the legal case. By Tuesday, I'd already secured a new apartment close to my job. Sure, my parents would have been happy to take me in, but I wanted my own space, and I definitely wanted to avoid bumping into Nina. At that point, word had spread throughout our small town. The simplified rumor was that Nina had been involved with her boss, who came to my house to confront me, and I held him at gunpoint until the cops arrived. Since Nina refused to move back in with her folks, I chose to leave instead. On my lawyer's recommendation, I stayed silent about the real story, keeping the audio recordings to myself for future leverage. By Wednesday, I started getting more calls from unidentified numbers. The 4th time it happened, I got a text from someone named Diana Drake, Titan's wife, asking me to call her. My curiosity got the better of me, so I did. She picked up immediately, explaining that Titan claimed everything was just a massive misunderstanding, and she wanted to meet face to face. I drove to Kensington, bringing along Troy's PIN recorder in case I needed evidence. We met in a small cafe, and Diana introduced herself. She was a striking blonde woman in her late 20s, outwardly calm but clearly on edge. I couldn't tell if she was a victim of her husband's schemes or actively involved, so I approached everything with caution. She told me all she knew was that her husband and his buddies had been arrested at my place, but she suspected there was more to the story. She asked me to fill in the blanks. Realizing she and the other wives deserved to know the truth, I suggested she call them over. I pointed out 3 women seated across the cafe, watching us from the moment I'd walked in. Diana seemed impressed I'd noticed, and she waved them over. After quick introductions, one of them asked nervously, "Is it as bad as we're imagining?" I replied, "Maybe it's not devastating for you personally, but it sure wrecked my marriage." Titan kept trying to lure my wife, and he almost succeeded. He got everything except actual sex. Then he and his pals planned to blackmail her, so she'd be available to them whenever they wanted. I watched their faces shift from disbelief to fury to shock, and I heard quiet swearing from each of them. "No wonder the police held them for so long," Diana said. "They were released this morning and immediately met up with their lawyer." "I'm guessing you've got proof," another woman said. I pulled out a flash drive. "Plenty. I have hours of audio recordings. Some of it is random chatter, but the important parts are very incriminating. I can summarize if you want, then you can listen yourselves." One woman shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe how clueless your wife must be, thinking that doing certain favors isn't cheating. And filming it too? That's insane." Someone else chimed in. "She probably thought it wasn't truly cheating if you never found out, thanks to those pills." I shrugged and noticed that none of them seemed shocked by their husband's behavior. "Why would we be?" one said. "My husband's an egotistical moron. My mom warned me he'd cheat one day. When we heard about a furious husband with a gun, we suspected it was something along these lines. But this is even worse than we guessed." Diana suggested we go to her office to listen to the recordings, mentioning that she worked in investments just around the corner. We played the audio, skipping forward through the arm wrestling parts until we reached the incriminating conversations. By the end of it, they looked as outraged as I'd felt. One woman made a dark joke. "Teach me how to bite it off if he tries any of that again." The rest laughed. Then they each made quick phone calls, none lasting longer than a minute. Diana told me that the 6 men had all been close since high school, brought together by bodybuilding. They were used to chasing women but maintained enough charm and discipline to appear respectable. They hung out more with each other than with their wives. "We only got to know one another because of them," she explained. "Our marriages have never been ideal. We're basically satellites orbiting their bromance." Once the other women were gone, Diana turned to me and said, "Scout, you're obviously a smart guy. Why were you stuck in a low-paying job?" I shrugged. "When I came back from the Marines, I wanted to be near my parents." She tilted her head. "They need your help?" "Not really," I replied. "They told me I didn't need to stick around, but I just settled back into small-town life." "How about you?" Diana admitted. "His brother is a high-ranking officer, but he's also content with a pretty simple job." I added, "When I was stationed overseas, I read a lot of mystery novels. It helped keep my brain sharp." She laughed, a sound I liked way too much, and I realized I was feeling a pang of guilt. I made up an excuse to leave. "You can call me any time," I told her, not sure if I should admit how much I'd actually welcome that. After enduring countless missed calls, texts, and voicemails, Nina finally managed to corner me, begging for a conversation. "So, Nina, what makes you think there's a misunderstanding? And why on earth do you imagine we could salvage this marriage?" She looked startled by my bluntness. "Saturday night, you pretty much stated you didn't see any harm in flirting, kissing, and letting some other guy touch you. You said it wasn't cheating as long as I wouldn't find out." Nina stammered. "I never meant to hurt you. I just got caught up with Titan, so..." I cut her off. So, the next time a hot guy shows up, you might get caught up all over again? She tried to explain, I didn't think it'd turn out like this. I thought if I erased your memory, everything would go back to normal. Surprisingly, I wasn't even mad anymore, just disgusted. Nina threw every excuse she had at me, finally admitting, I messed up, but I still want you, Scout. I want kids with you. I shook my head. You called it just fun. But you never thought about the fact that I'd eventually find out. And if I didn't, you'd just live with that secret. She mentioned marriage counseling, but I didn't buy it. How about we listen to a recording of everything you said Saturday night? I challenged. If you think that behavior's acceptable, we can talk further. Of course, I had no real desire to fix our marriage. I just wanted her to face what she'd done. That following Saturday, Diana invited me to a dinner party with some of the other wives and girlfriends. I still wanted to see Diana, but I didn't fully trust the situation. I decided to carry a small firearm just in case. I'm glad you showed up, Scout. Diana greeted me warmly. I hoped you'd trust me enough to come, and I respect you for being careful. You never know what can happen. The women swapped stories about their husbands' flimsy excuses. None of them seemed particularly upset about potential divorces. One woman said, they're mainly worried about losing money. We're all going after half their assets, and none of us plan on shelling out a penny for their legal fees. Another chimed in, my husband keeps insisting the charges are minor, but when I mentioned the recordings, he freaked out. Clearly, he had no idea you taped the entire night. I gave a small nod. I just wanted everyone to know the truth about them, I said. Diana chuckled. You should have seen Lenny's face. Like he never expected a jarhead to record everything so thoroughly. One of the other women chimed in. Thanks to you, I dodged marrying Andy. I need to dig deeper next time before I say I do. They raised their glasses in a sort of mutual toast, while Diana glanced over at me in a way that made me feel both curious and self-conscious. Another woman asked, so, have you spoken with Nina at all? I admitted I had, mostly to see what kind of excuse she'd try to give me. They guessed I'd recorded it and laughed. We've all done that with our husbands, someone said. Your wife is on a whole other level of denial. Another remarked, it sounds like she still doesn't view what she did as genuinely wrong, just that she's upset you caught on. Diana added thoughtfully, she's acknowledging her mistakes but still hopes you two have a future. If that's her definition of love, I'd hate to see what she does when she hates someone. Another woman joked. Diana turned and looked at me. She does love you, but she doesn't realize that love by itself won't fix your marriage. There's so much more to it than that. Her gaze lingered on me, and I couldn't help but notice her meaning. A few days passed, and by midweek, I decided to call Diana to check how she was doing. I was pleasantly surprised by how genuinely happy she sounded to hear from me, and we arranged to get together that weekend. I'm really glad you reached out, Scout, she said with a warm tone. After our last meeting, I wanted to call you myself but wasn't sure if I should. This probably sounds weird, but I hope you trust me a bit more now. She flashed me a mischievous grin, then joked, maybe I should frisk you this time, not just check your waistband. I stared at her, momentarily thrown off. We're not kids, she continued. I think we both sense a connection, even though we met under lousy circumstances. You might be wondering how I ended up with someone like Lenny. I tried to interject, but she kept talking. I was enamored with the concept of being in love. Lenny was intelligent, handsome, and had a body everyone admired. I liked being the one who won him. My mom warned me he'd break my heart, but I thought I knew better. By the time I realized she was right, we were already married. But I hate quitting, and I guess this was one time I should have walked away. She gave an apologetic smile, then added, I can understand why your wife was so taken with him. He's persuasive, a natural charmer. I never saw him openly try to seduce another woman before, but he denies ever cheating on me. My mom predicted it would happen eventually. She's not exactly shocked. She paused, cheeks a little red. At least Lenny and I never had kids. And honestly, sometimes I wonder what he even saw in me. It was obvious she was selling herself short. She was bright, kind, and incredibly attractive. I can be pushy, maybe too driven, she admitted. I grew up always hearing I should do my best and expect the same from others. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were passionate about their work and raised us to find activities we truly enjoyed. Whether it was dance, sports, or music. My dad didn't say much when I told him about Lenny. My mom did most of the talking. She had a few comments about you, too. Me? I asked, surprised. But I've never met her. That's true, Diana said. But you're part of the story. She sized you and Nina up, just like I did. So, I pressed. She agrees with your conclusions? She does. Nina loves you, but she doesn't really respect you, Diana replied. I gave a rueful smile. I've questioned whether she ever truly loved me. Oh, she does, Diana insisted. She wants your children and tried so hard to keep you from finding out about her affair. If it was just lust, she wouldn't have cared if you got wind of it. But there's a part of her that thinks you're beneath her, and that's why she plotted to humiliate you after sleeping with Lenny. That is next-level disrespect, and it makes my blood boil. I let out a short laugh. It didn't exactly thrill me either. Diana's eyes welled up. You don't get it. It infuriates me. I feel like ripping her hair out for what she wanted to do to you. It's not that I believe she's worthless, just that I believe you deserve better. She took a steadying breath. From the first time we talked, I felt you treated me with genuine respect, and you weren't afraid to face me. Even though I'm Lenny's wife, I admire that. I like you. Before I could reply, she raised her hand to stop me. Listen, you remind me a little of my dad. There's this saying that girls sometimes marry men who resemble their fathers. Obviously, I didn't marry Lenny, but I do see parts of Dad in you. My mom warned me not to let my heart get ahead of me, but, well, here I am. I have to know. Do you feel anything for me? I confessed. I feel guilty, because part of me wanted to be with you just to spite Lenny, but it's more than that now. I realized I don't really care about him. I care about you. That caught me off guard, especially since I'm still married, even if it's to someone who doesn't deserve me. Diana smiled. So you do like me? Yes, I said quietly. Ido. Great, she said, her eyes lighting up. Then let's take our time and see if we actually fit together. We both laughed, and then she asked, at least give me a kiss? I nodded, and she perched on my lap, leaning in for a deep, lingering kiss. When we finally broke apart, she grinned. I'm staking my claim on you, and if the gold in this mine runs dry, you'll move on. I teased. Oh, you'll reinvest everything? She laughed. Exactly, I want a relationship built on more than lust. I want respect, trust, and equal footing. I'm a pushy woman who goes after what she wants, just like my mom taught me. Over the following days, her words stayed with me. I knew I was on the rebound from Nina, but being around Diana felt so different. She was right. Nina may have loved me, but she never genuinely respected me. That realization hurt. Diana, on the other hand, openly respected me, even comparing me to her father, whom I'd never met. She was honest about how she felt, which both thrilled and scared me. Meanwhile, Mr. Beaumont moved forward with my divorce, disentangling my bank accounts from Nina's. Without a job, Nina was forced to rely on the small amount of savings we had, and eventually she had no choice but to ask her parents for support. That meant telling them we were separated and why, though I'm sure she left out the worst details. Her dad called me, upset, suggesting counseling, since he believed it was just a little flirting gone overboard. So I mailed him a flash drive containing the recordings from that night. 3 days later, he apologized, admitting he understood the bigger picture, but still needed to do his best to keep his daughter out of prison. Within 2 weeks, everyone realized I possessed full audio of what had happened. Both veterinarians involved lost their ability to administer anesthetics, essentially destroying their careers. At the gym, every female member learned about Lenny's behavior, and Stokes Fitness ended up firing him to avoid a mass walkout. My lawyer briefly considered suing the gym, though we ultimately let it go. The criminal proceedings took about 6 months, which I learned was actually pretty quick by legal standards. Local news outlets took a keen interest in the case, mainly because the men involved were somewhat prominent in town. Their lawyers attempted to block the prosecution's primary evidence, the audio recordings, and the men even tried pressing charges against me for holding them at gunpoint. That move failed quickly. Feeling betrayed, Nina ended up turning on them and testified for the prosecution, exposing the way they had planned to ambush me. By admitting her own role in attempting to drug me, she landed a 2-year sentence, though 18 months of it were suspended. Initially, I would have been content just knowing their personal lives were in shambles, but I had to admit, it felt right to see justice served. During that period, I found myself growing closer to Diana. She wasn't afraid to push me forward, insisting I enroll in college. Troy decided to join me and we both did well. By the time the trial kicked off, we'd finished our first semester with solid grades. Diana also introduced Troy to Ella, one of the goons' exes, and it turned out both women were incredible people. Troy joked that they shared a peculiar bond, thanks to their ex-partner's involvement in the fiasco. Diana and I chose to hold off on deepening our relationship until our respective divorces were finalized. And I have to say, it was worth being patient. On our honeymoon, Diana confessed she'd stopped using birth control months earlier because she was ready for us to start a family. She also surprised me with a temporary tattoo across her back that said, "Exclusive property of Darren Shore." It made me laugh out loud, and I felt genuinely blessed to have found her. Not long after, while Diana and I were grabbing a bite to eat, we crossed paths with Nina at her old workplace. She had returned there after finishing her sentence. She tried engaging in small talk, but I let her know Diana was now my wife and that we were expecting a baby. She looked rattled, and another server quickly stepped in to take over. Over the next few months, Diana and I settled into our new life. Ending my marriage with Nina had been hard, but it was also the right move for my own well-being. Diana and I threw ourselves into planning for our baby's arrival while the criminal proceedings wrapped up, ultimately providing me with a sense of closure. When our son was finally born, our lives were flooded with joy. Diana and I grew even closer, thankful for the second chance we'd been given. As I looked back on everything, I realized the rocky road behind me had led me exactly where I was meant to be. At Diana's side, holding our son, and feeling for the first time that I was truly home.